You opened your phone, not because anything was there, not because you expected a message. You opened it because you were still for 4 seconds, and your body decided that was unacceptable. You can't watch a show without also scrolling. You can't eat without reading something. You can't lie in bed without your mind already constructing tomorrow's list. You haven't sat with nothing for so long that you've forgotten what nothing feels like. And somewhere underneath all the motion, underneath the productivity and the podcasts and the constant low level busyness, there is something you are moving away from. You don't know what it is. That's exactly why you keep moving. I just feel better when I'm doing something. Stillness makes me anxious. That's not a preference. That's a pattern. And patterns have origins. Stillness is neutral. It has no inherent emotional content. Anxiety and stillness means the stillness is allowing something through that the motion was blocking. Psychologist Gabor Mate describes the inability to tolerate stillness not as a personality trait, but as a regulatory strategy. The body using motion and external engagement to manage an internal state that feels unmanageable when unoccupied. That internal state didn't arrive from nowhere. It was installed in an environment where stillness was not safe, where a quiet moment could become a tense one without warning, where being busy meant being useful meant being valued, and the moment you stopped being useful, you became visible in a way that felt dangerous. The child in that environment does not learn stillness as rest. They learn it as exposure. In adulthood, this becomes a person who fills every available space with activity. Not because the activity is fulfilling, but because the alternative is the feeling that arrives when the activity stops. The checking of the phone, the starting of new tasks before old ones finish, the inability to simply be in a room without orienting towards something to do. None of this is ambition. None of it is drive. It is a nervous system keeping itself at a controlled altitude because it was never taught that it was safe to land. But here's what nobody tells you about the thoughts that flood. In the moment you stop. When I stop, all these thoughts just come flooding in. Yes, and that flooding is not the problem. It is the solution being interrupted. Feelings move. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They are physiological processes with a natural arc, and when they are allowed to complete that arc, they resolve. What chronic motion does is intercept that arc. Every time the feeling starts to rise, the phone appears, the task begins, the podcast starts. And the feeling, interrupted mid-process, does not dissolve. It gets filed as unfinished. It accumulates. The collection of unfinished emotional processes is exactly what floods in the moment you stop. Not because stopping creates bad feelings, but because stopping removes the thing that was preventing the feelings from finishing what they started. Researcher Peter Levine spent decades studying how the body stores incomplete responses. Fear, grief, anger, longing, initiated and then interrupted before completion. The response stays activated, stored in muscle tension, in shallow breathing, in the baseline hum of a nervous system that never got to finish what it started. Chronic busyness is one of the most effective interruption mechanisms available. You never have to feel the feeling all the way through because you never stop long enough for it to arrive completely. The cost is that the backlog grows. And the more the backlog grows, the more the motion has to accelerate to stay ahead of it. This is not avoiding negative thoughts. This is what happens when the body has been trying to finish something for years and the mind keeps changing the subject. Now, here's the one that will stay with you. I feel guilty when I'm not being productive. Like, I'm wasting time. Not wasting time. Wasting something older than time. What you are actually feeling is a moral verdict about your worth as a function of your output. Stillness feels like failure. Not because it is failure, but because somewhere in your history, the equation between being and deserving was never established. Only the equation between doing and deserving. The child who was praised primarily for achievement, who felt most secure when being useful, who learned that love and approval were responses to output rather than to presence. That child does not grow into an adult who can rest. They grow into an adult who understands rest intellectually as necessary and experiences it emotionally as dangerous. Every idle moment activates the old equation. If you are not producing, you are not justifying. And if you are not justifying, you are at risk. At risk of what? The adult brain doesn't know. The child's nervous system does. In adulthood, this is the person who responds to being asked what they did today with a list, who cannot describe a weekend without structuring it around what was accomplished, who feels a quiet, ambient shame on slow days that has nothing to do with what actually happened. This is not work ethic. This is what happens when a child was loved more reliably for what they did than for who they were, and never stopped trying to earn what should have been free. The motion was never the enemy. In the environment where it was learned, it was essential. It kept you useful, which kept you safe, which kept something intact that might otherwise have been damaged. The problem is, the system is still running at full speed in a life that no longer requires it. I've tried meditating. I've tried doing nothing. I just can't. My brain won't let me. Your brain is doing exactly what it was trained to do. A nervous system calibrated for vigilance does not power down on command. Not because willpower is insufficient, but because the threat detection system that produces the restlessness doesn't take instructions from the part of the brain doing the commanding. It takes instructions from evidence. Specifically, it needs accumulated evidence that stillness is survivable. Neuroscientist Stephen Porges showed that the autonomic nervous system has to experience safety, not be told about it, not intellectually accept it, but experience it in the body repeatedly before it will allow the kind of downregulation that stillness requires. The failure to meditate is not a discipline failure. It is a nervous system giving accurate feedback about its current state of calibration. It was calibrated for an environment that required constant readiness. Readiness and stillness are incompatible. The path is not forcing stillness onto an uncalibrated system. It is the slow accumulation of safe experience that gradually recalibrates the system's baseline. The motion was always pointed away from something, not toward productivity, not toward achievement, away from the quiet, away from the moment when the thing you have been outrunning finally catches up to a body that has stopped. That thing is not catastrophic. It is more likely just the feeling that was trying to finish itself years ago and has been patiently waiting ever since. The stillness is not empty. The stillness is where you are, without the motion to obscure it. So the question is not how to slow down. The question is this: what would change right now if you finally stopped long enough to find out what is actually there? If this is someone you know, someone who cannot sit still, who fills every silence, who hasn't rested in years, send them this. They probably won't send it themselves.